I feel like you should know a little bit more about me before we get started. So I am a landscape architect, which means I design for a living. Uh, Landscape architects design everything outside. So I know about concrete too, and steel, and an untoward amount about stone masonry. But yeah, we'll be talking about the plants today, and they are my favorite material. And I actually got into landscape architecture after being a really passionate gardener and environmentalist for many years. I realized I was spending all my spare time covered in off with my up to my elbows in compost and advocacy, and realized, oh God, there's a job for this. So I went back to school. Public relations wasn't doing it for me. And I went back to school and graduated from UT Austin. And I was the second class that graduated in landscape architecture from there. So that was an odyssey in itself. And I have practiced in San Antonio my whole career, although that's kind of where I've been. Well, I spent a year in Austin, and my work has ranged from Houston to, shoot, what's the farthest north? There was some place in the Dallas region, and a little bit of work to the west of San Antonio and south to Laredo and the Valley. So I'd like to think I can relate to most of your ecoregions, depending on where you're from. What you will see in this presentation is going to be basically 100% Blackland Prairie and Hill Country, because that's where the bulk of our practice is. But I'm hoping that the design lessons transcend ecoregions and can be kind of universal. I hope I'm not blasting anybody out of the room with my voice. I am really spooked by audio systems like this because I have a big voice. So we're starting here. I just thought this was a great image to start with. This is Confluence Park in San Antonio. It is distinctive because the entire park is a living, breathing demonstration of the water cycle. So what you are looking at here, you can appreciate it on any level. You can appreciate it as some pretty scenery, or you can be looking at this as a physical illustration of what we can do with water to capture it and absorb it into the soil. So this kind of drainage swale has this massive 200,000 gallon tank underneath it that is a soil profile tank. So it's basically, if you picture a system of milk crates that are stacked up like several tractor trailers underneath the ground, that's what we're looking at here. And the roots of these grasses that are growing here are transporting that water efficiently and naturally, percolating it into the soil. And I was told I would have a little lag. Oh, good. So the challenge that we have in landscape architecture is that we use plants as a material, which would be all well and good if, as some of my clients think, they were like furniture. We're going to just put this plant here and it's going to do what you want here. And you and I know that nothing could be further from the truth. There is just not, I mean, I could germinate that bad boy from seed and it would not do what I want it to do there because of what I'm asking it to do. So notice, I've chosen these images of cedar elms to illustrate my quandary as a designer. What plants do in an elm of cedar elms is beautiful and ephemeral and changeable and all kinds of good positive adjectives. And then what we have on the right is what we end up with a lot in the built environment. So we're asking trees, you know, we all have the positive associations with trees from playing, well, if you were lucky, playing in the woods as a kid. And then we try and play in the woods in the parking lot of the Alamo Dome, and it's from hell. Just the one on the left didn't make it, big casualty right there. Ball moss is the only thing living on that because plants are opportunistic. But yeah, even the tree that is successful in this environment is responding in kind to the outrageous amount of reflected heat by covering itself in greenery and reaching to the ground and putting out extra sprouts. This is the difference between the native environment of a plant and what we're asking it to do. So that's a stark example. But yeah, the daily challenge, right? So planting success, in my mind, and this is kind of a cornerstone of the Native Landscape Certification Program's Design with Native Plants class, is that we match a native habitat with an existing condition, a native habitat with an existing microclimate. So you just kind of, you try to pair up these things. It sounds so simple. It sounds so simple, but it's so hard. So here's another beauty shot of Confluence Park. I tried not to make the whole presentation that one park because, but we had some gifted photographers working on it and I couldn't help myself. So here we are kind of in a transition between parking lot and grasslands. And this section of the park, every section of the park has kind of a different native habitat that it is duplicating. And this was the Trans-Pecos section, and you will see plants from the Trans-Pecos here. And even though we're in the Trans-Pecos, in this part of the site, we don't want to expose all our park users to the Trans-Pecos because they would perish. So we want them to love it out there, but the big floppy hat goes with me. So we want, you know, we have all these ratamas and all the greenery to cool it off. So I am waiting for, oh yes, a transition. So yeah, we have some basic habitats here. In NLCP2, we talk about three of them in particular. We talk about the woodland, you know, your treed habitat, your grassland habitat. You guys are no stranger to this, I'm sure. Your riparian habitat that becomes wet and can be a combination of the previous two. But we also have desert habitats in Texas, and they are extraordinarily useful with some of the built environment challenges that we create because their parallels in the built environment are things you will recognize. The building shadows. So we have all these buildings. It's very, very common in an urban environment to construct a building that is between 3 and 7 stories tall because most pneumatic elevator systems service about 6 floors. So you have a price break in the expense of a building. So if you have a site that's under pressure for development and can support a 6-story building, it's going to get built. And I don't know if you have noticed, but I have noticed that apartment, you know, 20 years ago, apartments would get built and they might be 3 stories. Now they start at 4 and 5, and it has to do with prices and what you can get out of the land. This is one of those things on a spreadsheet that I'm not good at, but somebody in real estate development is. So what we end up with is tons of building shadow. And look at the attractive material that we put in the building shadow. We have switch gears, transformers, dumpsters. We have all the good stuff is in the shadow of the building. And oh, wait a minute, the only practical place is on the front facing the street. Everybody puts it there, so it's our job to make it pretty. I get handed, wow, this sounds like a complaint, but I feel like it's cathartic for me. to kind of let go of the complaint that, I get chucked all these problems from engineers and architects, and they're like, but you'll make it pretty, right? So the building shadow. And then we go to the plaza, and if you're lucky, they look as good as this one on the campus of Trinity University. But the design situation is of a grassland because you have opened things way up. There's very little protection from the elements. And it's brutal out there. 6 months of the year, and the other months of the year it might be wet. So there you go. Then there's the swale, the riparian habitat, and I show you this one because it's entirely designed. This is a constructed swale situation, the Woodlawn Lake Community Center in San Antonio. These cisterns here were actually incorporated originally. I guess those two on the building still have the function there, purely a low impact development feature. They purely slow down the shedding of rainwater from the roof to a pond on the other side of, out of frame. So what they do in order to make use of the water, they water some of the landscape, and it gets filtered. All that material off the roof gets filtered through these native grasses and forbs that are planted here. So this is an extreme example of the end of the downspout situation, which we have everywhere in our built environment. And then we have the parking lot, our little friend, the cedar elm. That poor guy, he is doing a really great job. Good job, cedar elm. Yes. Oh, it's a Woodlawn Lake Community Center in San Antonio. Yeah. So next slide. So my solution, our smart solution for the building shadow is to reach for the woodland plants. Not a real brig. I know that's not an aha moment for you, but it is surprising how often we try to plant plants next to a building that aren't going to make it. This is an example. Facing east, this is the historic City Hall in San Antonio, and we did a landscape renovation to provide handicapped access to the building. And so you'll see some real faint access ramps in the background, but building things up to it and planting them with attractive plants was the brief, the design brief. So we took these massive cedar elms that were probably over a century old, these big cedar elms, and planted around them the things that would typically happen around them in the native environment, a Turk's cap, some grasses. Of course, you can see some non-native plants in there, but we don't have to talk about that. We don't have to talk about that. This is where the client decides a lot of things. Our city manager at the time was a big proponent of San Antonio looking like a semi-tropical paradise 365 days a year. So there's tons and tons of tropical evergreens. And well, they're all water efficient, so we've done that. So then your plaza landscape, you reach for the grassland plants. This is not an earth-shattering idea, but it is pretty cool when you learn to deploy it in special places. This is on a rooftop. So the reason we're looking out into the tree canopy is that we are 15 feet above the ground level. And so this is child safe in San Antonio. It's a facility to facilitate intake and care of children who are wards of the court or are in a legal situation usually with their families. So the whole place was designed to feel like an escape, and there's lots of opportunities to get kids and families back in nature. So the native plants, the grassland plants. Now, what this Turk's cap is doing there, I'm just going to guess there's a tree behind me. I hope so. because I'm here to tell you that's going to take a lot more water than they're willing to give it. But you see the dwarf wax myrtles and stuff, a little bit of Venesicanthus, and lots of the blue mist flower, the Greg's mist flower, which is the butterfly magnet, making the whole outside kinetic and drawing people's eyes and maybe thinking a little bit less about what brought them there. So yeah, I can't take advantage, I can't take credit for the really cool sculpture. But I was at the architecture firm where they designed that the other night, and they had a mock-up of pieces of it on the wall in the lab, and that was really, really cool to see how they worked through that. And then for the swale, we work with the riparian plants, right? This is at the Whitty Museum in San Antonio, and it has a lot of challenges because the site is almost 100% in a floodplain, which is really shocking if you live in San Antonio because you're like, I drive by there all the time, and it's, well, when it rains, the entire street in front of it becomes a river, and the actual river's on the other side of the building. So the site was traditionally populated by cedar, elms, and cypresses. And so what we did as designers to go in and kind of enhance the focus of the museum on Texas natural history was to kind of bring those ecosystems up to the front door. And so lots of drainage. There was a lot of new building involved. The museum, I think, doubled or tripled in size. So there was a need for a lot of swales to direct water and to absorb it. So you see, oh, my favorite, the dwarf palmetto. And you see lots of crinums, which really are not a native plant we use a lot in design situations, but really should because it's showy and it's very easy to take care of. And you will see other non-native plants we don't have to discuss right now. But it's one of those things, you're at the front door, I see sedges and I see native grasses. And of course, the smaller trees are bald cypress that are going to acclimate and kind of enforce that experience of being in a Texas riparian environment. Next, we're going to go, oh, the parking lot. So here's where I bring in the desert. This is where NLCP2 doesn't go because most homeowners don't have a parking lot. But oh my gosh, yeah, pardon? The health strip, yes. So I think there's some value here, and maybe we'll reevaluate that if we ever update the curriculum. But the parking lot, man, that's a place for desert plants, isn't it? Because remember, a desert is not only hot, so it's pulling in and radiating that heat, but then the desert is cold. When it's cold, it's never as cold as it is in a desert. It's dry, it's exposed, it's windy. So your toughest customers are here, and we see a number of them here. Of course, this is a great showcase for red yucca because it can kind of deal with anything. I'm using it in Houston, and it's doing fine. But you've got a good honey mesquite here. And notice the gravel cover that you're required to have because people are coming back and forth to their cars, and you need a place for the people to walk. Well, that's basically a desert surface. So I'm a big proponent of channeling the desert when we go to a parking lot. And here at Confluence Park, it made a lot of sense since we were trying to kind of showcase some desert plants. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a few other design challenges, not just the microclimate challenges, but also kind of this is what we want, when a client comes to you or when you have to serve the needs of a facility. One of the challenges is we want green all the time. And that's kind of what we ran into at City Hall. The city manager was all about green all the time. People People move to San Antonio and they think they can have green all the time because it doesn't get cold and snowy. I mean, it's like they haven't seen the movie The Alamo, where they shot it in February and March, and that is what it looks like. It is just a hellscape. Anyway, but it's natural, right? It's a cycle. So, yeah, the challenges of being green all the time are ever present. Again, the client thinks plants are furniture, just plug in one that's green. But if we are working with native plants, it becomes a delicate dance because our native plants are green at different times of the year, right? So we have to think through that cycle. And we also have to think bigger. We have to think about where are these people coming from when they're thinking about everything being green all the time. And this is where we're going to take a little walk into my background in cultural geography and just one class. But it was such a good one. It was so people have a geographical illiteracy, right? You know, it was so green in Pennsylvania. Why can't it be here? So Native to Know, this is for your reading list. Native to Nowhere is an outstanding book about this exact issue. And kind of a homogenization of the American landscape just based on our culture, you know. I remember being a kid and growing up, Saturday morning cartoons, it was always sunny and pleasant outside on a Saturday morning cartoon, and it was not in Indiana, I will tell you. Cold, wet, anyway, and then we have a green ideal. You know, we have this idea that that the lawn is this outstanding trophy that we must maintain at all costs until we all have our epiphany at some point, you know, where we kick the mower. Um, Requiem for a Lawnmower was a book by Sally Wasowski, which is definitely worth reading. So The American Lawn by Georges Teyssot, who I'm pretty sure is not an American based on the name, but it was an outstanding read and it's very entertaining. It's a good popular history of the American lawn. This is something we have come up with, that the lawn is green all the time. I mean, you look back in a historic photo and the black and white photos, if they're taken low enough, or if there's a complex enough, if there's enough, I'm not a photographer, but if there's enough depth of field, or if there's enough fine grain in the front of the image, you can see that most of the lawns were not one plant. You can be on a golf course and they weren't one plant. But well, I could lecture on that for a long time. So we've come up with this idea, it's all a monoculture, right? So, and then there's popular culture meeting the environment, right? Better Homes and Gardens told me I could have hybrid tea roses and notice the patio. The patio is a desert landscape, but the roses are right there. You know, it's probably concocted by the photographer. This did not last an entire season. And it certainly wouldn't have in our climate. But so this is what we're up against, right? This is what we're up against. And I have to sigh and swallow and explain things to people in a non-patronizing and helpful way. It helps not to patronize people. It really does. So, and then you've got, so one of the design solutions is just weave your evergreens throughout it. Every single thing does not need to be painted with the AstroTurf brush. You know, so here we have an evergreen oak. We have, I think I see deciduous trees in the background, but I'm picking out grasses have outstanding structure through most of the year, whether they are green or not. They are living. We probably have sedges in there. I see sedges. I see a lot of possible evergreen structure from the yuccas that are in the background. If there is a thread of evergreen through your landscape that turns brown for a couple months of the year, that's a victory. And that's what we can deliver with our native plants. It does take some explaining to people and some getting used to if they've, I don't know, come from Pennsylvania. But I had a next door neighbor who came from Pennsylvania, and after the 6th month of raking up live oak leaves, he was like, "What the hell?" He just stood there with his rake and said, "Mike, I don't know." And I said, "Yeah, that's what it's like. But we get the shade." Oh, he had a really tough time. He like spent all his time trying to correct his pool chemistry and oh, God bless him. Okay. Anyway, another another thing we can do with our desire for evergreen is we could shift our focus, change your point of view, and design for a natural look. So even though there is a ton of evergreen in this image in Phil Hardberger Park in San Antonio, there is also a very natural look, and it is actually consulted with biologists to make sure that the plants are appropriate to the site, which is really a mixed oak juniper savanna. Uh, so tons of live oak and quite a bit of persimmon, so that changes through the year. And we have a few evergreen sumac as a constituent of that, so that's evergreen, but changes color, which you don't notice until you're in a situation like this, where it's one of the few things to look at in the winter, at least for the modern American eye. But tons of grasses, there's maybe reframe the focus away from being all green all the time like a cartoon. Okay. And then there are other challenges, right? So there's a desire for order in the landscape. This is a really big challenge. We've been working with this one. Designers have been imposing order on landscapes since Egypt and Persia. We're talking what does that put us back? 5,000 years about. So we're acculturated to wanting to see things in rows. This is why when someone moves into a house, one of the first things they do with their shrubs is start putting them in rows. It's like, you don't have to have that, but okay, you do you. And yeah, so here on the campus of Trinity University, there is an order imposed by the arrangement of hardscape and spaces, kind of the even spacing of trees for shade. And yet there's a tremendous amount of variety because of the different plants that are used. And they spill gracefully over the edges of the pavement. Miraculously, we have a client there in the maintenance department that loves that. That was winning the lottery because lots of people don't want anything overlapping anything. And nature's not like that. There's overlap everywhere. So you can provide an orderly container. You can make sure your lines and your hardscape are crisp and straight. This is something that lots of landscape architects don't do. But in a public building situation where you have a very stark building and a very straight line streetscape, the coolest thing you can do with your vegetation is give it a straight lines container so that it can billow out and be soft. And the orderly container, you'll also notice, this is at St. Philip's College in San Antonio. The trees are providing a grid. This is kind of a signature of that campus. The one landscape thing that campus has going for it is a grid of trees everywhere. And it's wonderful because it's in an under-resourced community and it's a hot part of town. And God, those trees make it tolerable. And so you continue that onto a property. You have, you can even repeat your plants, but notice they're loose plants. We didn't have to use boxwood to do this. So we've got our native grasses, and I'm trying to identify the shrub. Oh, that's Rio Bravo Leucophyllum langmannii. That's the one of the evergreen senesos. And it's a wonderful cultivar called Rio Bravo that I use a lot. It doesn't, it's a wonderful shape and size that discourages having to trim it. So if you can bring that to a building department and say, you don't have to trim this, then people get pretty happy. And that makes more happy customers. Or you can go to the extreme with the orderly containers. At Confluence Park, part of the idea of the park, it was created for the San Antonio River Foundation. So they have an education program. And in order to, you know, it's very easy to not be able to tell the difference between grasses. It's embarrassing to me to be put on the spot and try to identify grasses because they are difficult to tell the difference between, you know, until they're in flower, right? A lot of people can't tell. You have to get down to the gloom and, you know, look at the gloom, you know, look at the, is it hairy? You know, just, just get out your taxonomy. So this park, the idea was they divided it into little galleries where you could, you have planter boxes of different grasses, single species. This was the idea. They're starting to seed out, so it's becoming a maintenance issue. But the idea is that they would all stay in one place. And so on this really gloomy January day when it was just spitting rain all day, one of my colleagues took this wonderful photo. And I just love that about this park is that it has all this great texture. Because texture is your friend, you know, and this one of the things that native plants have going for them above all others is that they're very strong on texture. It's just a terrific tool. You know, they bloom sometimes, but texture is always. And so this is kind of a bird's eye view of what that is. What we were looking at was probably this area here, somewhere in here, but each of these is a box of a different species, and you'll see them drifting toward the middle of this big, you know, fishy shape. And they start to blend together and create one big body of grasses. So that's a part of the park you probably can't appreciate unless you're in a drone. But it made a cool photo and it helped us win an award. So there we go. There's nothing wrong with a cool photo. So another design solution is to just provide structure in the whole design, you know, make a pattern out of it. This was a spot in San Antonio. It was a little hemisphere, is this former Pan American Exposition ground where the convention center and the Tower of the Americas are. And there was a street of magnificent old houses that the Conservation Society convinced the city to keep. And so in the middle of this big park of monumental buildings and stuff is this residential street. And they're being redeveloped as restaurants and shops and things. And so the brief was to create sidewalk cafe gardens, you know, gardens that were appropriate for these old houses. And the challenge was to do it with native and adapted plants that would deal with our water issues and be pleasant. And so notice the abundant native evergreens in here, all of these Weberville sedges mixed in with a little bit of, we have little punch ups of Turk's cap, thank you, Turk's cap, and mixed in with some other non-natives. But we had this existing planting of crepe myrtles in front of the building, and it just created this. They were so mature that nothing would grow on the ground below them. So you sub in the stuff that grows below live oaks, and there you go. So I just felt like that was a real success. And I do not usually design that modernly or simply. I usually am a lot more fussy and less geometrical, but this area called for it, and that was just a big treat to work on that. Okay, and then you can also provide structure through your plant selection. So here at Clausen Stubing Ranch Park, I'll bet you didn't know where that was, Clausen Stubing Ranch Park. This is in northern San Antonio. It's on the crest of a big hill, and it is, I swear, the windiest place in the city that I have found yet, and a great place to kind of find those caliche hilltop kind of species. We had a project manager who is a landscape architect for the city and just went out and when the construction began, just started harvesting all kinds of the plants. So a lot of what you see in the photo is what was there before. And he took care of them in his backyard with a hose. Uh, God love him, you know. And so yeah, our plant selection here, what I'm trying to point out is that the array of grasses provides a lot of texture and form, uh, a lot of vertical structure that these forbs would not have had otherwise. And if I just decorated this with the flowery forbs, it wouldn't have kind of gravitas in the winter or anything, and it wouldn't hold up to the kind of the muscularity of this monument. This monument has to be read and understood at 45 miles an hour by people driving by. So everything has to be big and bold. And so you provide structure not only through that plant selection of highly textured and architectural things, but also big sweeps. Because once traffic goes above 30 miles an hour, you won't see 3 of something. You won't see 2 of something. You have to see 20 of it, you know, to kind of make that go. That was my first lesson when I got out of grad school. I was designing a landscape for a streetscape in Katy, and it was just this adorable little garden I'd created. But it's like, no, Mike, no one will see these flowers because there are 3 of them. There have to be 30, you know. So another design challenge is that natives are unexpected in an urban context by a lot of people. We had a recent project where the Parks Department was getting tons of phone calls about the mowing that needed to happen. And it was like, no, it's supposed to be that way. So that, we'll talk about that in a minute. Well, why isn't it mowed? You know, this kind of stuff happens downtown. You know, everybody's all like, the tourism industry. So yeah, natives are unexpected in an urban context. Here at Trinity University, for many years, it was kind of a golf course campus. It was just this beautiful golf course. Yeah, just green and lush and oak trees. And over the years, they were realizing we can't keep up with all this turf. And frankly, a lot of it won't grow because of the big trees. So over time, many areas of plants well adapted to the shade got worked in, and we were behind some of that. And that was a great opportunity to introduce natives. And now the campus is feels more foresty than anything. Thank you. Thank you. Love that building. So one design solution is to find ways to educate. So at that particular project that I was talking about with the phone calls, that's when we decided to create a sign. We need to create a sign that says, no, this is on purpose, you know, and that's okay, right? Like, why not why not educate people? Uh, that may very well be. Actually, that's a really good point. Now, a lot of people don't want to be educated, but don't get me started on that. But you know, it's that is one way to look at it, right? So the purpose of this space, this is Confluence Park in San Antonio, was partly to educate. So school buses of kids come and they learn about it. Or you grab your mountain bike and you're going down to the Riverwalk to bike around and you see this and you're like, oh, you have a native grassland in front of you and you have the signs that not only show you what the plants are called in English and Latin, which will impress your date, but also you have plant ID, you have little line drawings so you can tell the difference between these things, because you could walk up and say, I don't know what a little blue stem is. You will find out, you'll find out what it's good for in habitat. And so I consider that was a real success in signage. That most projects are not like that. They have a lot of signage and it's good. And here's another design challenge. Budgets are low. So I mean, everywhere. Like I was thinking about it today when I was thinking about, the previous session was about grassland restoration. And I remember back when there was a period when I was doing a lot of residential work, I had a customer with a two acre site, and their front yard was this lovely space that would turn over well to a meadow because they didn't use it for playing or anything, you know. So it's a real logical thing. And then I'm down crunching the numbers to give them what it would cost, and I'm like, why is this coming up? Why is this thing coming up at $10,000 and $20,000? And then I'm like, oh, it's 14,000 square feet of front yard. That's why it costs a lot to turn it into a meadow. So you know, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it can cost a lot to do it well. Although our previous speaker, educated me about patience. That was a really powerful. You could mow it and see what comes back, and that would be patient. So yeah. No. These were not. These were executives. These were. My God, why didn't it happen last Tuesday? So here, budgets are low, right? So here's a good example. This is a restoration of San Pedro Creek in San Antonio. And those of us who've lived in San Antonio for 30 years or more, for many years, this was a drainage ditch behind industrial properties. And like, we were lucky that, you know, that there wasn't sewage in it. You know, you're just lucky that it wasn't that way. But there's been this initiative to clarify the water and purify runoff, create an amenity for people to use, and that feeds into the San Antonio River and keeps that ecosystem healthy. It's been very, very successful, but an immense portion of the project budget for the whole thing was spent on phase one. Then it came to our firm. And the rest of the phases were there. We're like, wow, this is going to be a grassland. This is going to be a grassland swale, because the chief objectives are to purify the water, and you start with small plants and they grow. So thank you. It's a wonderful place to be. I highly recommend it. So here's one design solution, is that easy care can be high in value. So whatever the price is on your spreadsheet, keep in mind your customer. Of course, I think of it in terms of customers. Your user, whoever's responsible for bankrolling this, needs to understand, well, what are the long-term costs? So sure, it's going to cost many thousands of dollars to transform this landscape, but what will it cost to keep it up? Oh, look, little Yopon hollies and a bunch of grasses. I think you can rake it once a year. I think you get the trash out of there, rake it once a year, refresh the mulch, you're good. So blowing the leaves, it beats the heck out of mow, the treadmill. So, be ready to be conversant about that. And then we can look at nature-focused maintenance. How will nature take care of it? So this is on top of the land bridge at Phil Harburger Park. And the land bridge was created, for those who aren't familiar, it's one of the rare, it was the first mixed human wildlife crossing over a roadway that was designed for land, at least in the US. Others have come along since, but it's kind of unique in that it's designed to have a human area and a wildlife area where the species cross and theoretically can be allowed to not interact. I think there's a lot more interaction than we imagine. And at nighttime, the creatures take over. But the story here is the landscape it's one of our nature parks. And so one of our nature parks. And so the whole driver of, of the maintenance is, well, what would happen here if we weren't here? So you're just thinking about what keeps it sustaining. So there's a little bit of plan for successional change for woody species can come up if they need to. You can reevaluate later and decide which ones come out. And of course, the animals are supposed to be eating on it. So that's part of it. Oh, here's another design challenge, scraping the land of biology and then expecting biology after that. So here's what happened. We do this all the time. This is like 95% of my projects are a scraped site that has to support life. So, and this is, we have ideas about what has to happen to a building site. And disabusing builders of those ideas is a challenge in itself, but some of it has to be done. We're lifting things out of a floodplain or we're taking a disused laydown yard for a public utility, which is basically hammered earth, a pasture for tractors and transformers and toxic things. And we need to cap it and plant it. So that is one of the things you manufacture your soil. You can manufacture a biology in that situation, which this is the same site. This is Confluence Park, and so it is covered with soil that has been manufactured from manure and topsoils, sand, and been made to function. Fortunately, that meant no sacrifice when you were creating a parking lot or a plaza or a walking space. Oh, God. The soil layer that we added was anywhere from, I want to say, 2 feet to more. We had to terraform a lot because, as I mentioned on that first slide, we've got that 200,000 gallons of storage underneath the whole thing. So there was a bit of extraction. And but a lot of that is over here on this ridge that kind of separates the park from neighboring residential properties. So it's a cap. The cap is usually 2 to 3 feet. So that's something you have to do sometimes. Ideally, we don't have to do that at home. Or in the case of the land bridge, you can stockpile that native soil that was already on the site, stockpile it and reuse it, separate it into topsoil and subsoil, and that way you aren't losing the biology completely. You still have some microorganism networks and you're able to put that back and mix it with new soils and allow them to proliferate. That's the word. I was going to say profligate, but that was not the word. Here's another one of those scenes. Now, this one you can see from a plane if you're coming into San Antonio from the Northwest. That is not just for the drones. And I believe that judicious design, designing judiciously with native plants and soil materials, is building demand for the native plants. I think that the generation that's attending Trinity University here now will have an appreciation for these things that I did not, going to school on a golf course. So not that there's anything wrong with golf, but I mean, it was botanically sterile. Yeah, yeah. So I'm ready, I think, for questions. I believe that was my last slide. Yes, questions and discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Basic biology. Have you heard of the Korean natural farming technique where they bury some medium, I think it's usually rice, in a place that has the biology you want, and you leave it there for a while and it collects the things and then you take it to your site?
I am going to struggle to summarize this for the online audience, but this was a really neat observation that in Korea there is a national technique for, and I'm going to summarize this, for collecting microbes, and you're collecting them by planting something and then transplanting. Well, that just sounds brilliant. I would love to experiment with that. Oh, someone's asking why you would need to transplant microbes, and I think the answer to that is that we create sterile places by creating building sites, highways, buildings. We unwittingly are creating a lot of sterile environments out there, and I think I'm delighted that people are questioning that, because I think we should be questioning it every time we put a shovel into the ground. Yes.
It's really long, but to summarize, she's asking about the nursery trade, marketing things that's native to Texas, but they're from some other ecoregion and being a problem.
Oh. Well, we struggle a lot in landscape architecture with sourcing plants. We struggle with sourcing. Our main concern is will it work on the site? And I think in the room we probably all know that the closer to the site we can get the source of the plant, the better off we are, because the genomics are going to be good to have adjusted to that site. The reality is that we're planting in February and we need 3,000 Carex plugs, and we need those. And so sometimes they come from slightly different areas, but I think the answer is working ahead. So we've done this a lot. We've worked ahead with wholesale growers to make sure they know this is coming, so that they're planting the plants and nursing them along. And a lot of times that's a conversation that you have with your project. I think I've lost the presentation. Weird. A conversation you have with your project owner about, let's pony up a little bit of investment now so that we can, in the early stages of the project, so that those plants come along and are ready for you. And we did that once. Here's a funny story. We did that once for a major park, and then Snowmageddon happened. And a lot of the trees that we had pre-grown trees, the idea was that we would have 6 caliper inch trees. So if you look at your hand and you like maybe kink your thumb out like that, 6 inches, that's 6 inches right there. That's the thickness of the trunk. These monster trees all needed to be grown over the course of a couple of years. and Snowmageddon happened, and a lot of them got storm damage. And I think there were a couple hailstorms. It was like the environment threw everything at us that the trees could handle. And then COVID happened. So the project went on hold for a couple years. And so we ended up with a lot of 8 and 9-inch trees that were too big for their boxes. And we ended up with a second crop of other trees and a very sticky situation for the property owner and the nursery owner. So I guess that's a complicated way of saying it's complicated. Yeah. Long story short, the more appropriately sized a tree is to its container, the better. A 9-inch tree that's busting out of its box is not a happy tree. And you put it in the ground and it's not really happy there either. I learned that the hard way. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Ooh, to block, well, the easiest way to block weed growth is to let the contractor scrape the heck out of it. But the neck, I mean, that, that I can just sit on my hands and let that happen. But weed growth, wow. Usually we have a lot of, blocking weed growth. That's a fascinating question. And I think I would answer that like that's something I really need to, as a professional, that's something I need to work on the specs for more because we end up with them no matter what. I would say one of the ways we manage that is the soil mixes that come in. We get them from reputable sources that we trust not to have nutgrass in them, for example. Generally, it turns out. But if, and we require contractors to submit to us samples of those soils that we can inspect, and I know to go through that with my hands and feel for seed. So not everybody does that, but it's really smart. Yes. Oh, no. Yeah, right. And so the gentleman observed that he's seen big plantings of red yuccas by the side of the road, and there's someone spraying herbicide around them in order to control the weeds, which is kind of, anybody who loves a plant is kind of freaking out because the yucca doesn't want to die either. So here's what's working in our favor. The yucca has has waxy coating on the outside, right? And it has little tiny squeezy stomata that are trying not to suck up a lot of those vapors and things. And its roots are deep and pretty judicious about what it's picking up. But I think the smart way to respond to that as a designer is to make sure our red yuccas are surrounded by compatible plants that will outcompete weeds. So a lot of designers, we like to put a pretty architectural plant like that in a field of gravel. And it's beautiful for the first year. And some of my colleagues, and I'm no exception, like to put down black basalt gravel because it's real sexy. It's like a painting looks great with a black frame. A landscape looks great with black mulch. It looks really good. Boy, 1 year later, you're like, where did all these leaves come from? You're like, blow that, blow that, blow that. And nature doesn't want to, a previous speaker said, nature doesn't like to be a nudist. So you're going to have plants everywhere. So let's design so that there's a good ground cover there. I can think of half a dozen off the top of my head. Frog fruit is going to compete well. Horse herb. I need some others, people. I talked a big game and didn't deliver. What? Woolly stomodia is stunning and it's an ecological companion. in theory, to red yucca because we only know of maybe 1 or 2 wild populations of red yucca. There aren't very many. Yeah, so there are all these options out there that creep, and we should be using them so that we can appreciate our red yucca without having to hurt them. Yes, ma'am. Oh my God. Okay, so the sedges. So take a little hike and go out to. Now I can't. Okay, we're getting some observations. Turk's cap and beauty. Okay. Do I need to rephrase the question? The question was, what do I grow under my live oaks? And my first thought was Carax, growing the sedges, because they will grow in the shelter of an ash juniper, which is the most challenging shade imaginable because of the root structure and stuff. But inland sea oats is an excellent option. I heard Turk's cap. I heard pigeonberry is pretty good. I'm struggling with it, but once you establish it, it is aces. It just wants a little extra water to start. And coralberry is really nice, especially as you go north. Uh-huh. So someone's making an observation. There are too many roots next to the surface under a live oak, and this is a natural situation. And what do the plants do? They go in with the vines. Vines will proliferate. So let's think about our shade tolerant vines and how they may be a native. Virginia creeper comes right to mind, and then it would provide all kinds of color. Yeah. Tie vine. Okay, I've been told it's time. So if it's time, it's time. I mean, I don't make the rules. I just live by them. You've been a great audience. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure yammering on to you about these things today.